Hey everyone, for those of you just joining us, I want to welcome you to the first annual grantee convening for the Warner Music Social Justice Fund Blavatnik Family Foundation. My name is Alencia Johnson, and I'm so honored to be your MC, but I'm also even more honored to be one of the founding board members of this illustrious Social Justice Fund board. As many of you know, the Social Justice Fund was founded in June 2020 in the wake of the devastating killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and too many countless other Black people. We made a commitment then to do our part by building a 10-year, $100 million fund dedicated to advancing racial justice at the nexus of culture and systemic change. And we've committed $23 million in funding already across our three grant-making pillars: education, arts and culture, and criminal justice reform. So in this session we're about to go into, we're going to focus on criminal justice reform and the innovative ways our grantee partners are leveraging culture to fuel change. This panel is led by one of my fellow board members, a partner in crime, or a partner in good, as I like to say, Ms. Tanya Koch, who is the director of the Ford Foundation's Gender, Racial, and Ethnic Justice team, focusing on issues of mass incarceration, harsh treatment of immigrants, and gender and reproductive justice. She previously served as a distinguished fellow at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice at the City University of New York. She was a program director on criminal justice reform for the Open Society Institute and a program manager for the U.S. Human Rights Fund. Tanya began her career at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and she is a graduate of NYU Law, where she was a Root Tilden Public Interest Scholar and Editor-in-Chief of the Law Review. She also holds an undergraduate degree from Yale College. Everyone, please welcome Tanya to the stage, who is going to be leading us in this exciting conversation.
Thank you, Alencia, and you took us way back in my history, but it's wonderful to be with you all at this inaugural gathering. I'm so excited for this conversation. And as Alencia just said, the Warner Music Blavatnik Family Fund Foundation, Social Justice Fund, was born out of a series of justice system tragedies. So I think it's only fitting that we open this gathering with a discussion of how brave and passionate advocates are transforming our criminal legal system. And I'm so very pleased to welcome four grantee partners of the fund who are advancing important work to shine a light on the role of law enforcement in Black communities and also to expand opportunities for people coming home from prison so that they might achieve their fullest potential to live in society in dignity, in power, and in rights, rather than in a state of perpetual punishment. You know, I think that, our lived experience as Black people, as well as seminal books like Michelle Alexander's New Jim Crow, underscore the reality that the justice system serves as a form and as a principal form of racial social control in the United States, in Brazil, in so many areas of the world around the country. Police brutality, racial profiling, disproportionate expulsion of Black children from schools, harsher sentencing in prisons and jails, all disproportionately affect people of color and with many times deadly consequences. Each of our distinguished guests today are using storytelling, media, and film to build a broader audience for their reform work, which of course takes place in jails, it takes place in prisons, it takes place in policy arenas. But really, we are beginning to see in this field greater use of creative media to amplify the voices of people in the carceral system and to shift policy in new and creative ways. So I'm really pleased to welcome to the screen today, Susan Burton, my friend and founder of A New Way of Life, which is an LA-based advocacy organization and transitional housing and leadership development program for women coming home from prison. We also have with us this afternoon Sam Lewis, Executive Director of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, better known as ARC, which works to end mass incarceration in the state of California by empowering formerly and currently incarcerated people to thrive. We also have with us today Daiwan Tatro, Senior Government Affairs Officer for the Barred Prison Initiative, which we like to call the Harvard of college and prison programs in the United States. And last but not least, we're joined today by Mercedes Cooper, who is Senior Vice President of Public Programming for Array, which is a film production company and artist collective founded and run by award-winning filmmaker Ava DuVernay. So we are first just going to ask each of our guests to take about 3 minutes to say a little bit about your organizational mission, what you do, and then to share, one or two examples of how your organization has used or is using culture, whether that's film, music, visual art, or other creative media, to advance criminal justice reform. And I'm going to start with you, Susan, because I know you have been at this, both your service work, your leadership development work, and also your leveraging of culture in film for probably, over a decade. So tell us a little bit about what A New Way of Life is doing in this arena. Please.
Yes. So thank you, Tanya. I'm really honored to be here and among such distinguished panelists. So A New Way of Life was founded in 1997, and its mission is to promote healing opportunity for formerly incarcerated people by taking a multifaceted approach to mitigating the effects of incarceration and ultimately eliminating mass incarceration. And it's actually been going on over a couple of decades that I've been at this following my own incarceration, Tanya. And we created a platform called Testify. And Testify seeks to elevate the voices and the stories of formerly incarcerated women, the challenges that they've overcame, the stories of family reunification, the stories of long prison sentences, the stories of family separation. And, it's been amazing what Testify can do or has done in removing the shame and letting people know the importance of their experience and their voices. And also, you mentioned Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. Following her publishing of the book, I felt like everybody in the world should read that book. And our first, we created a Justice on Trial Film Festival that we've been running every year since the publishing of Michelle's book. So it's been over a decade that we've created our Justice on Trial Film Festival. So I thought, they put us on trial, so we'll put justice on trial through our film festival, exploring solutions and exposing injustices. There were so many filmmakers that were making great films about the criminal justice system, passion-driven films, and we thought we'd bring together all of these films along with literature that's being written about the criminal justice system. And the film festival has been quite successful. We've created awards for Best Short and Best Feature Length. It's not the Grammys, but we're doing our community-based film festival. So, it keeps the conversation going. It gives people opportunity to come together and talk about what's happening, and again, exposing injustices and exploring solutions.
So Susan, can you tell us a little bit about how many films you show and in the film festival, and what's the growth been like in terms of the number of films that are treating this subject?
So the film festival happens over a 2-day period, and we screen about 15 films. The home of the film festival is Loyola Marymount University, and but we've taken it through to a few different universities, but we settled at Marymount University in Los Angeles because Loyola has been so gracious and has built all of these classes and all of this volunteer and just really have extended the campus to us in a real huge way. So we have a reception, an opening reception, and then we have 2 days of films. And it's grown tremendously to attract people, filmmakers who are submitting their films for review, and students, social justice groups, just a wide variety and array of folks, directly involved people, family members. So it's grown to about, I guess, 500 people or so come to the film festival each year. And this year we're going to be exhibiting a book called Halfway Home by Reuben Miller, a great selection, a great book. But we have authors come and so forth. So it's really, really great and invigorating and very engaging to be able to pull together a film festival.
Well, that's so exciting. And I'm glad that you're reminding us that literature is a form of art too, and that can be a powerful way of mobilizing people, as Michelle's book is a fine example of. So why don't we go to you, Sam? Tell us a little bit about how ARC is thinking about creative storytelling and manifesting that in your work.
Thank you so much, Tanya. And actually, 3 of our short films were actually shown at the New Way of Life's film festival a couple of years ago that highlighted 3 of our young ladies of ARC that had different struggles, came home and overcame the system, and are just shining examples of what support can do for people if given. And so another way that we've actually worked to use arts, we partnered in 2019 with Endeavor Content to create an art show that highlights art from inside institutions. It was the first one through Freeze, which is an international art show. Most of the piece of art sold. And then, of course, we had COVID and the pandemic, but Endeavor Content has committed to have a art show specifically for people that are incarcerated every year that they have Freeze, regardless of which country it's held in. So that's an incredible opportunity. And then most recently, what we've done in partnership with NBC Universal, we're in the process of creating a commercial that directly talks to the lack of humanity and the lack of giving second chances to people that have been incarcerated. NBC Universal totally funded this commercial. It should drop in July. The voiceover, I think you'll recognize. I'm not going to give that one out when you hear it. And this partnership came through an internship partnership with NBC Universal. NBC Universal has now placed 5 of our members who are formerly incarcerated into full-time positions, including a position called the Vault Keeper. And the Vault Keeper is the person that's responsible for all of the unseen films and commercials that NBC Universal is creating. We're in the process also of creating music through our youth. And so our youth, we built out in one of our housing for our youth a recording studio, and we have a number of artists that have been working with our youth. I was told that I could not tell who was doing what until their music dropped. You'll see some of it. A lot of it is being pushed out on social media. But I would like to highlight one of the young men that has partnered with Common named Bobby Gonzalez. He's open for Common and a number of others with his new career. He was commuted by the governor, former life prisoner, and now he's making music. And the music reflects both the trauma and the resiliency of the human soul and spirit if given the opportunity. Please look out for Bobby Gons, as he calls himself. Incredible human being, incredible artist, and you'll see more through what we call ARC Creatives.
Oh, wow, that is so exciting. That is so exciting. So can you just talk a little bit more, Sam, about the short films that you're doing? Tell us about the content and who's the audience for those.
The audience, we've been creating these short films now for 3 years, and the audience has been majority. If it doesn't go through the film festival with Susan, we've been showing them at USC School of Social Work. And so the idea, we're using it as an idea for healing, for people to be able to express both the trauma and the healing that they've gone through after coming home or while incarcerated. And so these both short films and some of the creative writing that we've been highlighting allows people that have gone through a system that was meant to crush them, a way of both releasing the pain and the trauma that they've experienced through both writing and through film, and a way to express that so that people fully understand it. And this came from the beginnings of ARC. So ARC was founded on the transformative power of storytelling, and that links directly into our policy change. Like literally, we've helped co-sponsor, write 33 pieces of legislation in the state of California that have now made our criminal justice system incrementally more fair, not as fair as we would like for it to be. But this was done, what a lot of people don't realize how this was done. It was done by hundreds of ARC members that are formerly incarcerated, literally going to the state capitol and using their stories to get people, our elected senators and assembly persons, to understand the pain and suffering that this system causes and how to change that system and make that system one that could be one of both compassion and healing.
Beautiful, beautiful. Why don't we go to you, Mercedes? Well, you actually work for a film company, but yet some of your work in this area, as I understand it, is working on visual media and non-film media. Can you tell us a little bit about what Array is up to?
Yeah, so thank you so much. It's it's such an honor to really be up here with the individuals who are working in this space daily. I think I mentioned before in our prep calls, I'm not a social justice expert. I'm a film nerd. And so I work for a film organization. I've worked for Array for nearly 11 years now. And so many people might know us through our film-centric work. So either films that we release and distribute by Black filmmakers, filmmakers of color, and women of all kinds, or our television and film production, such as 13th, When They See Us, Selma, Queen Sugar. But we also have a nonprofit arm where we're focusing on developing educational and public programming initiatives. So in my day-to-day, I oversee Array's public programming, our film screenings, our conversations. But after the world witnessed the murder of George Floyd, like so many others, Ava, our founder, we were just called to do something. And for us, for Ava, what that really sparked that incident was the question, why don't we know the names and see the faces more of police who are taking lives in Black and brown communities? Why don't we know who they are just as much as we know the victim's name? And so for the past 2 years, I've been overseeing an initiative called LEAP, which is the Law Enforcement Accountability Project. And through that initiative, we've been commissioning artists to explore and reflect on specific cases where Black lives have been taken by police abuse, misconduct, all that. And so with that, we have gone out of our comfort zone quite a bit in that we have not as yet commissioned a film artist. We've worked with photography, an artist named Stephen Irby, poetry by W.J. Lofton, culinary art by a fantastic woman named Jocelyn Jackson, who's a culinary activist, mixed media art by Delita Martin, hand type art by Reggie Black, and original music by Ray Valverde. And it's really important for me to speak all these artists' names because creating in this space around things that could be triggering, traumatic, but really doing this activist storytelling as a foundation for using art to continue these conversations about accountability. So really what each project calls for is for them to call out the police officers involved in their specific cases who, for pretty much all these cases that we've addressed so far, no charges have been brought against the police officers. And for us, that's problematic. And the only way that we can really find justice is by continuing to say the police officers' names in our stories, in media headlines, all that, so that there is accountability for the other side. In a lot of cases, these police officers get to go on with their lives. Maybe they move to a different precinct, maybe they go to another county, but for most cases, they continue on. And so for us, while I know many of my fellow panelists are working on the side of bringing folks home in a safe, restorative way, our side is working on, victims who didn't even get their day in court, you're talking about issues of de-escalating situations, alternative forms to violent or lethal force for taking persons of interest into custody, things of that nature that a lot of our projects reflect on, don't even have, there is no other side for them. Their lives were taken.
Wow, that is so powerful. And before we move on to Daiwan, you just have to tell us what Jocelyn, the culinary artist, is doing. That is really piquing my interest.
Yes,
Curiosity.
Which when we found her, we thought she's doing such interesting work. She was already doing it in her community of Oakland, of creating menus focused on restorative justice, healing, within Black and Brown communities. And so what she decided to do for her project, which centered on Philando Castile and Geronimo Inez, was create basically a conceptual menu and a tablescape reflecting on both sides. Two men, not that many years apart in age, went to schools very close by. Where does that disconnect happen where, within 7 seconds, a person's life is taken after a police being pulled over for, whatever reason. And so, she created a whole conceptual menu exploring and using ingredients that really explore both men's lives. So the food was delicious actually too.
Wow, that is so deep. I love that. I just love that. So Daiwan, let's hear from you. You were, as I understand, you were a graduate of the Bard Prison Initiative yourself, and tell us how your story was told and how you are telling up the stories of others, please.
So thank you everyone for being here today, to Warner for having us. Tanya, it's always great to see you. And I'm an alumnus of the Bard Prison Initiative. I got out of prison in 2017 and have been able to do some pretty amazing things with the degree that I earned. You see it on the wall behind me. But the Bard Prison Initiative is a college and prison program. We have about over 300 students across 7 different New York State correctional facilities, both men and women. We've been offering classes in prison where students earn Bard College AA and BA degrees for 20 years. And a lot of people think of our work as in degree granting, right? Couldn't be anything further from the truth. We think of our work and what our students go out and do with those degrees, right? And so some years ago, while I was still incarcerated in 2014, Lynn Novick and Sarah Botstein came into the prison and began exploring how to make a documentary of the program, right? And that documentary, College Behind Bars, was released in 2019 and to amazing reviews. And it's a documentary that, one, shows you what BPI is and who incarcerated people are and what they are capable of. As we like to say at BPI, we are in the business of defying expectations of who college is for and where it might lead. And then you see those individuals complete their degrees and go back to their communities and go on to accomplish amazing things. And one of the things we were able to do with the film, right, because the vast majority of Americans still watch their documentaries on PBS, right? We knew that we made this film, put it out over PBS with Ken Burns' name on it and Lynn Novick directing and Sarah Botstein producing, that there's going to be a lot of people who are going to watch this film who otherwise would not have hit play. And we doubled down on that, went all over the country, did a social impact campaign, did several screenings on Capitol Hill. And for anyone who doesn't know this, prior to 1994, incarcerated people in the United States were eligible for Pell Grants. The 1994 crime bill banned incarcerated people from accessing Pell Grants.
You might have to explain for some of our
Yes.
our audience overseas what a Pell Grant is.
So a Pell Grant is a needs-based assistance for someone in the United States to attend college, right? And Congress in 1994, in a real tough on crime moment, decided to ban incarcerated people, despite the fact that if someone got an education in prison, they were the least likeliest to go back to prison, what we call recidivism, right? And also had the most successful post-release outcomes. They stripped eligibility away. Here in the United States, we went from having over 700 college and prison programs to less than 10, pretty much overnight. It was devastating. It is a moment in the history of mass incarceration here in the US that really takes the veil off what that system is, right? Congress came out and blatantly said, we have interest in people's punishment, none whatsoever in their futures, right? It is a really, really ugly moment in the history of mass incarceration. So 1994, stripped Pell Grants away. The film came out in 2019, sort of at the height of the movement to restore Pell Grant access to incarcerated people here in New York, went all over the country, changing hearts, changing minds. And I was just at a graduation in a correctional facility this past weekend, and Congressman Bobby Rush, who all of us may know from Illinois, was a commencement speaker. And he said that he was sure that one of the screenings we did in DC really, really pushed the needle and was the tipping point to getting Pell done. So in 2020, we were able, myself, BPI, many others in this field, working with national coalitions, people at the Vera Institute, the Prison Fellowship, were able to restore Pell Grant access to incarcerated people, right? And so that's one of the ways that we leverage college behind bars across the criminal justice field. And about 400,000 incarcerated people are now going to have access to college and prison once again. This is a big deal, right? For our students at BPI in New York, the average recidivism rate is 40%. For our students, it's less than 4%, right? That is an amazing difference, but we don't leave it there. Them students not only don't go back to prison, they get out and go on to Yale. They go out and go on to Columbia, NYU, earn PhDs, master's degrees. Some of them work at the Ford Foundation, Tanya, as you know, but in philanthropy, in businesses, in the public and private sector all over New York City. But we didn't stop at Pell, right? I am someone who got an education in prison, got out of prison, had really, really amazing opportunities, and would wake up every day. And I got older brother who's been to prison, younger brother who's been to prison. And the reality of my life every day is much different from theirs due to the fact that I had the opportunity to get an education while I was incarcerated, right? And so after Pell was done, I was working in government affairs for BPI. And for a long time, we've been trying to restore TAP, which is tuition assistance program funding in New York to incarcerated New Yorkers, right? Because following the federal lead, a bunch of states also banned people from accessing state level financial aid. We're talking about really, really pernicious systems. And so I had the honor on behalf of BPI and working with Turn on Tap Coalition in New York over the past 3 years, leveraging the film, leveraging the students in the film, leveraging the goodwill that the film created around this issue, right? In 2004, BPI, working with partners in government, tried to restore TAP, and the plan fell apart overnight. There was huge opposition from Republicans, right? And one of the things that when we did the polling earlier this year, we found that this issue split the Republican base in half. Actually, there was plurality support amongst 2020 Trump and GOP voters. So it's a nightmare issue for somebody in the Republican Party to come out against, and they almost made no noise when the governor announced here in New York, after a long time of people working on this current campaign, that she was going to get this done this cycle. And we got it done, right? And so many more people across this country, many more people in New York have access to higher education because we were able to leverage this film to change the narrative, to change people's hearts, to change people's mind, and take that to our legislators and say, now's the time to act.
Yeah, it is really such a beautiful story, Daiwan, of how really compelling story, in this instance, the long form documentary film, can go right to the heart of policymakers and how it really made a difference in the context of a campaign that was just kind of beginning to reach a point of real momentum. So, you all have talked about different applications of art and storytelling. Art as a form of personal healing and transformation, storytelling that's directed to policymakers, art as a form of naming, shaming, and accountability. And I want to ask you all if you could reflect on the question of audience. Right? How do you think about the audience for this creative content? And, how has it expanded your audience? And maybe, what advice do you have from others about how you actually do reach that audience? Because of course, it's one thing to create some beautiful or moving content, but it's another thing to get it distributed, to get it broadcast, to get it to the audience to do the work that you hope it to do. Can one of you maybe reflect on that? And also, just before I forget, I'm going to invite each of you to post in the chat a link to any of this content, to your websites where some of this artistry lives, so that others can take a look at it during the course of our conversation or afterwards. So who would like to venture an answer on the question of reaching audiences?
Raising my hand, not because I have a good answer, but because that's, I think, one of our challenges. We started this initiative during the height of the pandemic and quarantine, and how do we reach audiences online with these projects is something that we're constantly discussing. How do we find our audiences, particularly because, once again, we're not working in mediums that we're super familiar with. Film, obviously, we know how to do that. We've been doing that. We know how to distribute. But in terms of what do I do with an original song? It's a learning process. What do I do with a conceptual menu? And so we've found creative ways, I think, to start amplification of these projects. For instance, the culinary menu, we produced it as a recipe book, right? Something everybody knows. There is online 3D photography of the actual tablescape and all that stuff, but we literally just went old school and mailed out the recipe booklet to supporters that had signed up online. And that was one way for us to just get it directly into their hands of people who we knew, or doing social media giveaways and things of that nature. So those are some of the things that we're doing, is looking for, kind of sometimes old school avenues of distribution with these projects. Happy to be coming out of quarantine and ready to start actually phase 2, which is a re-amplification of the projects, and creating more spaces for in-person connection around the work. In February, we hosted an event here at our creative campus in Los Angeles, which dealt with architecture and restorative justice in the built environment, and talking about how space defines perhaps a lot of our communities, and what does that mean when people leave their doors every day, or when they come home from prison, right? How can those spaces provide resources for community instead of bars and aggressive policing tactics and things of that nature? And that was, a great start to sort of this in-person concept of really having people engage with a topic related to LEAP's mission. So that's some of the things we're doing.
Beautiful, beautiful. Would any others of you like to comment on the question of audience and how you reach it?
Yeah, so we reach our audience through social media, through we run commercials on our radio stations, and then through the classes at LMU, through word of mouth. We reach out to places like ARC, other places of recovery. Because Tanya, one of the things that one of the goals is to allow people who are directly impacted to see themselves and to heal and to understand the larger context in which they've been criminalized and build community, help them drop the shame and become a part of the organizing, a part of the movement to end mass incarceration, while also helping the education process of students who are really involved and have really real life hands-on experience with directly impacted people. So it's also helping the family to cope with what's happened with their family member as a part of what we do, and giving them a place to kind of bring their challenges, bring their thoughts, bring their shame even, to help them to just be a part of a community that's not going to badger or shame them around, what's happened to their loved one, to their family member. It's amazing to watch what happens during the film festival and how people find their voice and people begin to speak out and up and ask questions. But we outreach, Tanya, you know me, I just go for it. We make it happen. We've had ARC, heavily involved in their membership coming and participating. We've had the Bard Prison Initiative come, and a couple of their staff members that were at Ford at the time come and speak about their experience. So it's been great.
And Susan is.
Tanya, if I may, before you move on, just with the question on the question of audience, and I can be brief. First and foremost, I'll just say, with bringing the film out over PBS, we knew that we would reach a certain demographic of Americans who wouldn't see it otherwise, right? And then it went out over Netflix and Prime Video, and we would reach other demographics of people. But one of the most important demographics that we reached with this film, and we made a really, really good effort to get the films into prisons, right? Yeah. And we did screenings in prisons all over the country. And then were some of the most impactful screenings that we had. And so we were viscerally aware that other incarcerated people, myself especially, were going to see this film, right, and be inspired by it, right? And it was going to change how they thought about what their possibilities were in the world and help them reimagine themselves, right? And so we didn't make this film particularly for the everyday American. We wanted them to see it. We want to change their heart. We want to change their mind, but we also wanted people in prison to see it and for it to change their lives, right? I've learned of Bard College, BPI, through a 60-minute segment, sitting in a cell. And I said, oh, wow, this is what I want to do with this time that is otherwise being wasted in prison, right? And as I said, I just came out of a prison this past weekend. And when the incarcerated individuals came up to me and he said, hey, they brought the film in here and showed it to us, and that inspired me to enroll in BPI. So just really, really amazing impact inside of the prisons.
Oh, that's beautiful. I would be remiss, given that this fund is operated by a music company, Warner Music, if I didn't ask about the potential of music and the music industry to advance social change. And so I'm just wondering how could we lean into that as a community of activists? What do you see as the potential? And maybe, Sam, I'll have you first answer this question, given that I know that ARC has really pushed your partnership with the hip hop artist Common to do some amazing concerts in front of, I think it was the Capitol in Sacramento, in the capital of the state of California, to lift up themes and the need for reform around juvenile justice. But tell us, do you have other ideas about what more the social justice community could be doing, and what more Warner Music could be doing on the other side of things? How could the music industry help partner with social justice activists and causes.
Yeah.
He also did concerts, two of them on maximum security facilities, where no incidents happened, no problems, no incidents whatsoever, and it just demonstrated what music can do. You can find all of that under Redemption, the Redemption Tour through Common. That has allowed us to do other events in conjunction with an organization called Represent Justice, with the NBA players going into facilities. And so bringing what we often call influencers, celebrities, to raise the voices of, or to raise the visibility of the humanity behind these walls that we often lose sight of. Bobby Gons, who I spoke of earlier, he had already been commuted by the governor, but what was amazing was we went into California Rehabilitation Center, and we're sitting in these circles that we sit in and talk about the journey of each individual that led them to prison and what their hopes and dreams are. And Common asked if there were anyone, was there anyone who did music? And Bobby Gons went a cappella right there, then went on stage with Common during the concert on the Yard, and then he comes out and now he's working with Common and a number of other artists. But the point is those opportunities. And then in terms of what can an amazing organization or company like Warner Global can do, we actually have been talking to Dr. Stennett about creating internships. This is what initially we started with NBC Universal with an internship program. We had to go through a process of working with their HR department because of background issues. And now we have a streamlined process where people can intern, not with just NBC Universal, but DreamWorks Animation, Pascal Pictures, and a growing number of other media companies that actually offer jobs afterwards. And this is what we were hoping to do with Warner Global, was create these internships for people that are coming out of incarceration to have an opportunity to see, let's say you hear so many people that say, well, they want to be a rapper or artist, but you want to learn the music industry. And so you can learn these different facets of the music industry by internships. And the last part I'll say is this. I went to the Super Bowl, and the most powerful thing I saw was the unity that music creates. During the entire Super Bowl, if the Rams scored, half the audience is screaming for the Rams. If the Bengals scored, half the audience was screaming for the Bengals. And then when the halftime show went on, the entire stadium just lit up and everybody was screaming in unison. And what it shows you is the power of music that can actually unite people. And I think if we harness that, especially in this space of figuring out what do we want when it comes to social justice? What do we want when we talk about real racial justice? What do we want? We want to change the criminal justice system and make it more compassionate and fair. One of the ways is definitely through music, because music is a universal language that can unify people.
That is indeed true. That's really beautiful. And I want to just do a little shout out here to Mercedes Cooper's organization, Array, just about the power also of artistry and film to not only power social change, but to help fundraising. And this is a story that I'm connected through a donor fund called the Art for Justice Fund that we manage here at the Ford Foundation. The benefactor of the fund is a woman named Agnes Gund, who has been a long time art collector, very wealthy woman. And she, a few years ago, saw the screening of the movie The 13th. This is a documentary film by Array Studios about the history of one of the US constitutional amendments that ended slavery, but not in its entirety. And the film just really draws the connection between slavery in the United States and mass incarceration. So this, 80-year-old Park Avenue socialite saw this film, and the very next day she called my boss at the Ford Foundation and said, I was just so moved to tears by this film, and I am going to sell a painting, my most treasured painting in my collection, and I want to donate the proceeds, which in this case ended up being $100 million, to advance the movement to end mass incarceration. And so that is just, one of, I know, many examples of how art can really be a force for social good. So before we end the session,
just give a shout out.
Sure.
To Art for Justice and comment on that, because that story brings me to tears every time I hear it. I mean, obviously I was here when that happened, but I mean, Art for Justice, they're just amazing. The event in February around architecture that I referred to, Art for Justice funded that for us. We had Miss Aggie Gunn here with her daughter, Catherine. They were here at Array just to see that whole day come together and support us and what we needed to, the message that we were trying to convey around that particular issue. So they're just, I mean, she's just phenomenal.
Well, I think it's just a beautiful story of how that kind of storytelling can just be so powerful and move people to action. So before we move to the question and answer, I just also want to give a little bit of promotion to Susan Burton, who was maybe too modest to mention the impact of her book, which was published in 2017, which is called Becoming Miss Burton. It's a beautiful memoir about her journey from motherhood and tragedy in losing her son, resulting drug addiction, and ultimately her coming out of prison and transforming her life and the life of so many other women. And I understand, Susan, that your story is going to be made into a major Hollywood film. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I guess I would say it's in the works. I'm working actually with Felicity Huffman, and my trip here to New York was a trip sparked by Whoopi Goldberg. And we're just kind of putting it all together. Really want to find the writer and the showrunner, but I guess I'm ready at this phase to actually create a movie. It's, like Barred Prison Initiative. If something gets out there, it really has the ability to really change hearts and minds and broaden people's perspective about, what can happen, what it looks like for rehabilitation, what it looks like for healing. And we do all of that. Tanya, you all supported that book to go into prisons all over the nation. I think I printed over 12,000 copies and walked in prisons all over the nation and did book readings with women. And, right now, still today, women are writing me letters, and women are saying, when I read your book, I knew I had to come here and I knew I had a chance. But the most striking thing for me when I went in those prisons were the women with tears in their eyes saying, when I leave prison, I have nowhere to go. I end up getting back trapped and coming back to prison. Will you build a new way of life in my community? And that created the idea and sparked our SAFE network, the Sisterhood Alliance for Freedom and Equality, that trains people and trains formerly incarcerated women to take on roles in their own communities and create reentry projects. I can't be everywhere. And I want to say that I'm forever indebted to Aggie, because it feels like prior to writing that book and prior to Art for Justice, women were just not spoken about a lot when we talked about mass incarceration. Now we have 24 sites, Tanya, 22 in the US and one in Uganda and one in Kenya, that are ushering women back to safety and creating a place to heal. And it's just like, I'm so grateful, and I'm almost in tears now just thinking about all of the ways in which Agnes Gunn, Aggie as we call her, has helped to, I'll say, mother this movement and create opportunities for change. And, I'm indebted to Ava DuVernay too, because, when I saw the 13, I was furious. So I guess she was moved like I was furious because I knew it, because I lived it. It's just great to be here. And it's great to see people that look like me that's getting support. I'm like 25 years in, Tanya, and it didn't look like this at all. But I'm just really, really grateful to see this, be a part of it, witness it, and pay it forward. Thank
Well,
you.
you are doing that in spades, Susan. You are really doing that with buckets of love and generosity, and also funding and getting so many of these other transitional homes for women off the ground. So, thank you, and thank all of you. So we're going to move to questions. The first one is from Henry, and he asks this of each of you. Now that Save the Music has expanded to working with justice impacted youth, we find that funders are asking about how we track post-release outcomes for these creative projects. What successful models are there out there that we could learn from in terms of, Henry, I gather you're asking about the impact of these creative projects. How do you think about tracking those?
So Tanya, what I want to say, it's difficult to track healing and impact when people want other types of numbers. So Sam might have something that he works to track the impact of the work he's doing, but it's difficult to track somebody finding their voice and the impact that has on the inside of them. So Dewan, Mercedes, Sam.
I think that it really comes down to how you define success. Yeah. Right. There's a lot of people who want us at BPI to define success in terms of recidivism, right? Our graduates don't go back to prison. That I mention that because it's sort of a glaring fact and it catches people attention. But if you go to our website, you almost see it mentioned nowhere, right? Because we're less worried about people going back to prison, because we know that if you give people access to high quality education, that's going to be a byproduct, right? And so what are we really doing? And again, we're defining expectations, who college is for and where it might lead, right? People in prison should have access to higher education. They're going to get out and take those degrees and do amazing things with them. And one time I would say at BPI, we sat down with a funder, a large philanthropic organization. I'm not going to call them out, in New York. And they said to us, and it was a really absurd question for us. They said, well, we want to give you this grant, but we have a problem. Not all your students finish your degrees with BPI. Some of them, they'll start a degree with BPI in prison, transfer their credits to CUNY, finish at CUNY. In our spreadsheet, we don't have a place to, where do we give the credit to? CUNY is not our grantee. And we said to them, the student gets the credit. And we had to walk out, right? And so I would say it's how you define success. It's what your mission is, but you can't let, lose sight of people over spreadsheets, right?
Yeah. I agree with you, Divine.
I have a bit of an experience that links both to present day and some years ago. So I was involved in a documentary that started in 2006. Probably one of the first filmmakers that had full access to a prison, administrative segregation, all of the counseling, everything. It was called In an Ideal World. this particular filmmaker had, I mean, unfettered access to staff, lockdowns, interviews. And the initial film was about a rehabilitative program called Alternatives to Violence. And there were about 20 participants, all with long sentences or life sentences. Every one of these participants have since been released. This film came out, received a bunch of different awards, was shown on PBS, and the filmmaker did not want anyone that was in the film to be able to have access to use the film. I literally have one DVD copy of it. I posted the film I posted a link of the film, a trailer that was on YouTube, and received an email from the filmmaker saying, cease and desist or I'll sue you because you haven't paid to use it. I was like, my image is also in this film. And so then I did a little bit of reading and research and spoke to some attorneys, and they said, well, as long as you're not trying to profit from it, you can use pieces of it and use it in another film. But we've never had the opportunity to show the 20 plus individuals that were in that film that have all been released now. Every last one of them are doing great. No recidivism. They all had higher educations or trades. They're all like involved with the crimes throughout the state of California. But there's no aftermath. And part of it was like, this was a lesson that I learned the hard way. We signed away our rights by giving that filmmaker the right to use this film, but we did not realize when we signed that we could not use the film. And so the film is there. PBS aired it a few times in 2015. But what about the people that are in the film that have come home and demonstrate that when they find their voice, when they're healed, when they have an opportunity, they never go back to prison, they give back to their community, and we can't, like, personally, I can track all of these people because I'm connected to them. But other than that, there's been no, like, with that particular filmmaker. By the way, that particular filmmaker kind of dropped off the face of the earth, and I'm asking or working with another filmmaker and asking if he'd be interested in, like, doing a follow-up with each one of these individuals. What is your life like after a life sentence so many years later?
Yeah, so important that we not only tell our stories, but that we own them, right? And we make sure that the distribution allows it to go where it needs to go in the world. Such an important point. So here's a question that I think is probably great for Susan, but maybe others of you. How have you used artistic mediums to highlight the experiences of girls, women, and gender expansive folks who have been incarcerated? Susan, you were talking about your short videos about women, We Testify. How are you using that and putting those out in the world?
Yeah, so we've made these vignettes, shorts of women's story. And what we did is that we featured them in the film festival, but what we also did was host showings and viewings with lunch. We did some viewing with Tatiana von Furstenberg, who had art from the inside, and we did the Testify showings with the art. And then they're on the website at A New Way of Life. You can go to anewwayoflife.org, and the Testify videos are there on the website. One of my hopes is to actually, my plan is to actually take the SAFE network, the Safe Housing Network providers, and do testifies with them, not only for our website, but also for their website. And, Sam made a really good, point about people's images and the way we take people's images and use them. I really talk to the women that I work with, both SAFE providers and the women in our homes, and tell them, how important their experience is and how valuable it is, and not to allow themselves to be exploited. And even with the Testify, when we do Testify with someone, they maybe spend an hour and a half with them, but we always give them honorariums. We give them nice size honorariums, and they're shocked But it's been still that your time and your story is valuable, and you shouldn't be the only one in the room not being paid.
Mhm.
And so, that's what we do. It's just a part of being ethical, I believe.
Yeah. So important, so important. Just before we wrap, Susan, or maybe Annalisa, you can put in the chat the link to We Testify. I really encourage everybody to go there and see some of the just amazing stories of healing and resilience on that platform. So we are at the top of the hour, and I just want to thank all of you, Sam, Dewan, Mercedes, and the great Susan Burton, for your time and sharing your amazing work, both amazing advocacy and incredible creativity. We so appreciate all of you. Thank you.
It's been an honor being with everyone. Just an honor. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you,
Bye,
Tanya.
everyone.
All right.
United we stand. Let's
Thank you.
push forward.
United we stand.
That's right.
And I want to thank the foundation too.
Absolutely.
The Blake Look Family Foundation and Warner Music. I really have enjoyed all of the panels that you've had today. It's great. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.